Howdy, you two friends. On this one here, we're just starting off on the back end of the house, just finishing up some trim paint there underneath the eave. I think I showed you doing the front end last time, but I always try to put off this back end because it's just so sketchy on that ladder. It's so high up, and there's like just a janky little rock edge on the back side of the house, so it gets pretty scary working up there. But so far, so good. But you can see I just neglected doing everything, even the final trim on the rubber roof cap there, but can't put it off any longer, so we're just doing the battens there, and then we'll finish up going around the window trim there, and then I think I have to caulk a couple pieces of sheeting there on the end to weather tighten it, and then here we are with that. Then we'll just put the last piece of the long piece of the battens there. Still have to cut small pieces to get them go to the very top, but first we'll have to picture frame in that back end so we could finish those extended battens, which same thing on these two ends of the bump out. And I think that was the final pieces of the original run of that dark trim. And I ran out of caulk, so I had to go to Wally World and get that so I could finish up this last window trim. And then we took a little break after doing that, and we'll explain some other things that I was doing. All right, so I got all the windows trimmed up. I still need to do some finishing touches and the bevel siding below the windows, but sometimes you get burned out with one aspect of the job, so I meander around to a different one. And right here I got some old growth 2x4s. Took these out of a garage in Portland, Oregon that was being demolished. It was probably built in the 30s. So back in the day, 2x4s were actually 2x4 thickness and old growth for the most part. So the grain on it is a lot tighter, so a lot stiffer boards, but it just looks a lot better when the grain's tighter. So what I'm doing here is I took one of them and just ran a little section on the table saw at a 1/4 inch thickness, 3/8 and a 1/2 inch. And so what I'm thinking about doing with this, and then you got all the nail holes, so it's kind of gives a unique perspective on it, and you can see the really tight knit grain. So what I'm thinking about doing with this stuff, since I have a bunch of these, is running those pieces along the seams on the ceiling here. And since a lot of spots have this little dip and whatnot, you're going to need a little bit of pressure, because I was trying the 1/4 inch putting in here, because you'll have the nail part there and the nail part there, and it still sagged. It just wasn't enough strength on it. The 1/2 inch obviously takes care of it pretty well. Can't do it with both hands, but anyway, it'll kind of level it up. And 3/8 did pretty well as well. So just trying to figure out which thickness I want to go with. Might do 1/2 inch. We'll see. And then in the end, I will probably run these all on a router and put a little profile on it, edge around it, and then maybe even run the 2x4s through a planer just to get a fresh layer on top there. And then I'll probably run some gel stain on here, darker color, to make it really pop from the ceiling panels. But anyway, we're just playing with this, see what you guys think of these pieces for that, with the nail holes and all that stuff, and see if it looks good to you. I have the material, so it would be free. Otherwise, I'd probably have to buy something. I got some other wood in there in my little shed there, but I don't know if I have enough to cover everything, but definitely do with these old 2x4s. So we'll see how it looks. All right, so I always like to use reclaimed lumber, obviously here, and it never fails. When I put a new blade in, within 3 boards that I run through, I'm going to hit a nail no matter how hard I look for them. It just never fails. And this blade is one of those where I'd hit a nail, and so it wasn't working great. So what I did was took these 2x4s and I just ran just a smidge on each end to see if there was any nails. Didn't find any, so then I switched out the blade so that I wouldn't have to ruin it. So anyways, that's what we're doing here, just cutting those little pieces off. And I went in with the size in between a 1/2 inch and 3/8, so just a little less than half, a little more than 3/8. So compromise on the sizes, and I think that'll be a good size for working on the top trim. And now I just have to decide if I'm going to paint them or stain them. I'd like to stain them, but it might just make more sense to paint them. But anyway. Well, we got through a bunch of them, but this one here, when I cut the ends off. Yeah, she's beyond usable. Lots of buggies got in there and did their damage. And I'm going to cut it up. Maybe an end piece is good or not, but probably shouldn't worry about it. I mean, it's just 2x4. So anyway, thought I'd show you that. All right, so we got through all those 2x4s, and here I'm just taking some of my cedar bevel siding, and just kind of trimming off the very bottom end where the paint is, just so it has a fresh piece of wood there, so it doesn't, there's no flaking paint or bubbled up paint, so it just has a new fresh surface, so it looks a little better when I put it up. Unfortunately, when I started putting these up, I forgot to run a bunch of them through there, because I just went to cleaning up the ends, and when I ran out of the stuff that I had trimmed off, I just started working on the pile that hadn't been trimmed off on the bottom part. So oh well, it is what it is. But yeah, so we just cut a bunch of pieces here, and then we're just stacking them up underneath the windows, and I think this gives it a nice, cool, unique look. I mean, there's only so much you can do with a toaster on wheels or a shoebox or whatever these big square houses are. With the battens, gets a little more texture, and then obviously boxing in the windows all the way down to the bottom gives it this space here to put something else unique in there. So we got board and batten and bevel siding all in one. So I think it looks pretty good. And here I think I gave it about a 4.5 inch reveal. So about a 1/2 inch sitting on top underneath that overlaps. And you can see what I ended up doing here on a lot of these windows, the ones that don't have paint on them like that, is where I just flipped them over to the back side, because the other side, you have a lot of flaking paint or just lots of layers. And then that paint comes around the back side here, and you can see me here where I'm using my little cheese grater to try to knock off a bunch of the little bubbles and flaking paint. So when we get this new coat on there, it looks like it was newish wood. I mean, you can tell it's reclaimed when you really look at it, especially on the backside. The backside of these bevel sidings, it's not as textured, so it's kind of flat. And you will see in a few spots where I do use some where I stick the painted side out, and I'll explain that in a second here. But here I'm just replacing finally putting in the final little batten sections above that front window here. And what I decided to do here on the front end of the house, the wood siding on the top there and that little peak, it kind of matched up with the little trim piece that goes underneath, and so water was getting into that little gap, where it met. So, and those lights, water was dripping out where those lights were. So what I decided to do was take this little skinny bevel siding that I have and put that on there, because I had it hang down about a 1/2 inch over the front fascia, so that any water that hits that will fall off the house instead of seeping into where those lights are and getting wet and rotten in the future. So, and plus it just adds another little unique feature to set it apart from other old school single wide, especially the ones with these little banjo truss roofs or whatever. I can't remember the names of these, but these flat beveled roofs. And it doesn't look as clean where the metal trim is. When I put it back up here, I tried to get it as straight as possible to make it look like it has a little peaked roof on it, instead of just being rounded over. But it's really hard to make it look like it peaked, especially with the 2 inches of styrofoam underneath the roof cap there. So it has to, that's always going to stick up, that few inches. But having this siding, so when I'm putting the trim on it, it kind of warps around each bump, so it just doesn't look as straight. But hey, compromises, right? So as long as it's watertight in the end and looks good, I think we'll just have to go with it. I was going to do this in the back end of the house too, but I decided it's kind of a pain. It took me most of the day to do this section, so we'll just go with the standard wood rough sawn siding in the back there. And it overlapped the back of the eave part, so the water isn't getting in there, and I didn't have lights in there to worry about as well, although I wouldn't want water in there because it would rot it out at some point in the end. But I think it's good to go, so we'll see. And if I do notice any water seepage in the back, then I can always do on the back end what I'm doing here. And I did decide to paint it white because I thought about painting it that dark color, the same as the trim as the windows, but then it would just bleed into the black cap of the roof. So then it would just, I think it would look kind of awkward. So I think it was a better choice to go with the, the main color of the house. So I don't know. Let me know what you think, and then we'll move on to the next part. All right, yeah. So now we're going back to the bevel siding, and this is why I remember why I forgot to cut the bottom ends of that white paint off, is because I went through my original pile of bevel siding, and then I had to go dig deeper into my pile of wood in the tent, and so I had to pull out the longer strips, and I think the table saw was in the shed, so just got lazy and didn't cut that bottom paint off. And then you see there the one with the white paint exposed, where I was going to explain that. And it's basically because this stuff is, reclaimed siding, so it's been taken off a house, and some of them on the back side, you could see there was some bug damage from when it was sitting on a house. Something got behind there and ate away a little bit, or when it was pulled off the house, the nails that were driven in there stuck in the house, so kind of blew out the back end of the siding. So some of them just had some holes in there, so it just looked better to have them painted side out, even though it's going to look a little bit different when it's finished with the painting that I'll be doing on it. It'll be a little more darker texture, a little more pronounced texture to it. And like I said, the first coat of paint's going to make those stick out like a sore thumb because there's already paint on it, and I'm using semi-gloss, so those ones will shine and the other ones will be dull. But as I put another coat on, then the other ones will get closer to it, but still going to be a little off because they will be a little bit flatter, as in not as much texture, but that's a-okay. Anyway, I didn't show every single window, but you get the point. I don't want to bore you too much, but it is sometimes fun to watch the whole process. So I don't know, maybe let me know, what do you think? Do you guys enjoy seeing every single aspect being done, or maybe skip around where you're like, all right, I saw one window, I don't need to see how you do every single window? But anyway, I'll probably keep doing it the way I'm doing it, but unless I get overwhelming input about it. But here we're just jumping over to finishing up the batten trims to go all the way from the cut piece to the top. And for a lot of these, I just put a little bit of wood glue in there before I nailed them up, just kind of give it a good seal, so if it does get wet, it doesn't let the water seep in there and create a wet spot and some rot. We'll see how that performs. I don't think I did all of them, but did a bunch. So I'll paint them. They stick out like a sore thumb right now because I haven't finished painting them. The trim, the in between parts where it's cut. So hopefully it looks better when I do paint them. And if they still stick out like a sore thumb, then maybe I'll go around and mix up some sawdust and some wood glue and just dab around the cracks there and sand it smooth, or maybe some caulking or something, and then paint them again, and hopefully they'll look seamless after that. But that'll be a different time. And then here, I said I'd finished all the dark trim everywhere except the outer bump out section, and I did find one more board that was 7 feet long ish, and I was able to cut 3 pieces out of that, so it was just long enough to finish what I needed there on the bump out. So just trimming it out. I did have to cut a few spots that were pretty big because there's some cracks in there, so I wasn't sure if it was going to be enough with just one board, but one giant board to make the 3, but it worked out. And then we just took our cheese grater and scraper to get all the bumped old paint off of there, and then put another coating of this dark colored paint on there. And I think I ran out of that paint here after doing this and maybe 1 or 2 of the window bevels, so I had to go get another gallon of that at the depot. But yeah, before I did the batten sections on the bump out here, I had to from the bottom to the top, I had to make sure I get this trim put in there so it had something to meet up to. So it was nice to get that aspect of the job all done. And then I got all the battens up there, but I ran out of the pre-painted stuff, so I have the original yellowish color on these, so they stick out like a sore thumb too. But we'll get around to painting those at some point. But for now, we just wanted to get it done. And then, been a while, I decided to take a trip down to Portland for a housewarming party. And then met up with a bunch of friends and just only took one picture down there at some flower gardens, the Rose City of Roses it is. And then it's also the 1 year gotcha anniversary of Callie to the family, and she's been a great addition. So glad to have her. Glad to have you all, and we'll see you on the next one. Take care. Bye-bye.